in hybrid mode. So make sure, and I'll come back to this with housekeeping, when you're speaking in the room, that you identify yourself for the benefit of folks online, although we have this wonderful technology with the owl that has ways of picking all of that up. So the purpose of this meeting, as is frequently the case, is to hear some status report updates from us as Redding co-chairs, and to just talk about some updates with the collaborative efforts that are underway with some of our community partners, with other state agencies. We have some great guests talking about some things that we've had questions about. And of course, here's some updates from work groups specifically and some of the initiatives that we have talked about as priorities. So that was the agenda. So some courtesy reminders. We just ask that you, as I said, speak your name before offering your commentary. Those of you online, please mute yourself when not speaking. And don't forget, we are recording this. So I guess behave accordingly. I don't know. So and then any consortium members who are online, can you just type your name into the chat as part of our roll call? We just want to make sure we know who's here and that we do indeed, I think I got the nod that we do have quorum. Okay, cool beans. And just as a reminder, just want to make sure before we do that to shout out that we do have leaders, educational leaders and students from both Delaware State University and the Institute for Public Administration at UD here as staff members to provide support. We are very thankful to you guys. We would not be able to do anything without you. So we would now entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from our last full body meeting, which was on June 5th. You should have seen those draft meeting minutes via email. I don't think they are good. We didn't use that paper to print them. So hopefully you had a chance to review that and would love a motion in a second. All right, Maria Matos has made a motion. Can we get a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Aaron Bass. We've got a second. And did we want to go ahead and do a full roll call? Kelly, I'm looking at Elena. Everybody signed it. Everybody signed it. Well, I mean on the minute. No? Okay. All right. Okay. So then I will take that all in favor. Consortium members here present. Aye. And if you're online, can you just type an aye in the chat? And any opposition to approving those minutes? Great. All right, we can move on then. Okay, so our co-chair update. I'm going to do a few slides and then Matt is going to take over. So this is really based on our goals that we did a number of exercises earlier in the year to talk about what our priorities are and how we want to prioritize our priorities. And so this is just a little bit of an update for that. Move to the next slide, please. Next slide, yes. So our number one goal that we discussed was to fulfill the charges that have been given to Redding and to follow through on the initiatives that we had underway. Some of these action items, as you can see, I'm not going to read every word here, but the expansion of the ECAP for Wilmington students, expansion of wraparound services for Wilmington students, provision of scholarships for educators at our identified schools. These are things that are all being implemented. And then we do have ongoing development of some of these other items, the ones that are marked there in progress. So, we'll talk a little bit more about how the educators work group is pursuing this work when we get to their update, but looking at planning for professional development. The dashboard, we're going to get a good update on tonight, a data dashboard that is focused on students in Wilmington. And then in progress, maybe is being a little bit humble when it comes to the yearly data report. That's something that we have done for many years. I'm not sure that everyone knows that. We have analysis on data that is squarely focused on outcomes for Wilmington students that we have been doing for a long time. Maybe it's just this year's isn't quite published, but that is something that's available on our Solutions for Delaware Schools.com website that we've been doing honestly since the WEAC days. So next slide. The next goal that you all gave us was that we want to define our relationship with Redding and the Wilmington Learning Collaborative. And we, of course, have taken this very seriously. And there was a document that was created by staff that we have utilized to guide some conversations about how we might potentially align. Of course, we also know that the executive director of the Wilmington Learning Collaborative, Dr. Burgos, who's here with us tonight, has recently been onboarded. So we've had the opportunity to meet you, and tonight you get to meet, I'm not sure how many people in this room you haven't already met, but you're going to get to reintroduce yourself for the purposes of the Redding Consortium audience. And we're looking to continue that relationship, meeting regularly with you. And we know that you're conducting a landscape analysis really robustly that we think will continue to guide how our alignment comes together. So the seeds have most definitely been planted, and we are working on cultivating them. And we'll hear a little bit more about the work of the WLC in just a few. So the third goal that was elevated was supporting collaboration with organizations and issues related to public education. And that includes coordinating with the Department of Education on a number of the items that we have secured funding for. So that's ECAP, that's scholarships, professional development. There's been coordination with department on and the Data Service Center on the dashboard. We'll hear about that. And of course, the implementation of some of these wraparound services with the recipients of those funds, Bancroft, Bayard, and Coomba when it comes to the wraparound services, and on full day pre-K, Kingswood, LACC, Leap of Faith, and St. Michael's. And now, thank goodness, it's Matt's turn.
Well, I'm going to be pretty brief because I think that Senator Lockman, I mean, these are really numbers that just put some figures behind the slides that Senator Lockman just shared with you, and we wanted to share them just because I think it's important to be able to look back and see that there has been some real substantive impact from the work that this group has done. $10.2 million a year in funding is more than substantial, and as those of you who have been on the consortium for a few years know that the bulk of that money is for the programs that Senator Lockman was just talking about, for the outside school time programs, for the full day quality pre-K, for the scholarships. And those are programs that didn't really exist before Redding raised them. We had outside school time programs, obviously, in our schools, but nothing of the order of magnitude that the Redding program is offering up. There's an RFP out right now for 3 schools that will be eligible for $1.9 million a year for a 3-year period of time, and that's just above and beyond anything that we've been able to provide for high poverty elementary schools previously. So that is substantial. I think you'll hear a little bit more later about the early child care, but both the full day component and the compensation level for the frontline workers that we have been able to make possible is again something that wasn't really around before we got into it, and the scholarships just weren't around, period. So these are all new, they're all part of the budget now and are going to be continuing. We just wanted to give you some sense in terms of the number of students that have actually been touched and what's actually happening on the ground.
All right. So with that, we're going to move to the next part of our agenda. We are very, very excited to have Dr. Laura Burgos, the Executive Director of the Wilmington Learning Collaborative, here to introduce herself. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself and share with us some information about the WLC.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Excited to now be part of this rich ecosystem. Again, my name is Laura Burgos. I am the new inaugural Executive Director of the Wilmington Learning Collaborative. This is my first time formally gathering with the consortium, but I see many familiar faces in the room and many folks that I've spent the past few days with. So lots to share. I'm going to try to be very specific. As you all know, we had our very first council meeting since I've stepped into the role last week, and very exciting. We were able to move forward a number of items, including the 4 positions that will make up the core WLC leadership team, as well as our operational budget. Senator Lockman, you mentioned the landscape analysis, so I will say that we are currently reviewing a number of proposals from some familiar entities such as the new teacher, the TMTP, as well as Cognia, the Leadership Academy. The goal of the landscape analysis is not to tell us what we already know. We're in the schools, we know what the data is telling us, but what we really want to do is get at the barriers. We really want to interrogate teaching and learning systems and identify where we should focus our efforts. And this is going to drive the solutions. Something else that I'm very excited about is our educator leader teams. We've been providing training and support led by the DSEA for our on-site decision-making bodies at each of the 9 schools, and the ELTs, the educator leader teams. These are the decision-making entities that are really going to get us to a place where solutions are coming from the school communities. So we're very excited about that. We have a ELT kickoff coming up next month. You'll hear a lot more information as we map out the details. In October, we will also be gathering all 9 WLC principals for the first time for a day-long retreat. This is a critical moment, bringing all principals together and really getting us to rally around a core set of priorities. There are many commonalities across the schools, and we want to make sure that we're supporting our school leaders in working together to establish a cohort model to drive solutions forward. Lots more to come, but again, we are focused on honoring the true vision for the WLC, and that is ceding power and putting the decision-making power in school communities.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Burgos. I think we wanted to allow a moment, if that's okay with you, for any questions that folks might have. All right, well, you've definitely been out there, I think probably already answering all of those questions, so kudos to you for that. Going once, going twice. All right, Matt. Oh, no, I'm gonna let you do it.
Okay. We're gonna hear from Caitlin Gleason, who's the Associate Secretary of Early Childhood Support for DOE. And she's gonna share some, I had to get your title right. She is going to share some updates with us regarding the pre-K funding.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be here for tonight. Apparently in person for a lot of people too. So thank you for the invitation. My name is Caitlin, and I am going to talk a little bit about the Redding program that we've implemented in the Department of Education, kind of a few of the facts to help us all norm on what it is, and then give some updates because I know you've had some previous meetings to in the program. The first thing I just want to share is what is the Redding program all about. So this is a full day preschool program. So the preschool is 3 and 4-year-olds in our city of Wilmington. And so this program serves children who are residents of the city of Wilmington. So we actually have programs who serve children who might not be in Wilmington, but the children live in Wilmington and they go to the program outside of Wilmington. It is a full day, like I said, up to 7.5 hours per day. And that also supports teachers who have, higher qualifications. So our state-funded preschool program, we pride ourselves in having teachers that have 50% have a bachelor's degree at least, and then other teachers in the program have at least an AA who are working towards that higher credential. And so what that means is we see higher quality interactions with children in that space, and that's super important because we know that when a parent or an adult is with that child and for so many hours during the day, how they act with that child is going to directly impact their success in school and life. And so this program, because we are paying a much higher rate for that full day care in our pilot years, it has taught us that, hey, we do really see a lot of success in this type of model. So we took this kind of pilot program of having 3 and 4-year-olds who are being paid at a higher rate, and we actually expanded it for all of our statewide seats. So I'm going to say that again, this is like hugely important and cool. So we piloted our Redding preschool program with a smaller number of people in the city of Wilmington. And because we saw an impact from a full day with teachers who are getting paid the salary that they deserve because of the qualifications that they have, we wanted to expand that statewide. So now we are paying for a full day for the first time in our state-funded program. And that is in Kent and Sussex County, and actually, all of Sussex County because of this program. So it's really cool and huge. And I just want to pause there and see if there are any questions on, you know, the pilot of the Redding program moving into what we're currently doing, which is a state early care and education program that is modeled after those Redding full day requirements. Yeah, that's really amazing. And
What's the number?
yeah, so we'll go into the numbers.
Delaware.
We can do.
What's the rest?
Sure, so, so I'm gonna talk about it. So the reason why that's also important is because when you start to get into the numbers, it gets a little confusing, you know this, right? We're gonna braid and blend some funds. So what we're doing on the state side is trying to be better at taking the burden off programs for blending funds. So we're actually blending Redding funds with our state appropriation for ECAP, our Early Childhood Assistance Program, and our preschool development fund with our federal grant funds. And so on the back end, the Department of Ed has 3 different funding sources. So the reason why you see $4.99 full day pre-K seats, they're offered, and I want to clarify, in Wilmington, using the Redding requirements, we're only getting 3 million from the Redding, so that's actually not fully funding all of the seats that are following those Redding requirements in Wilmington. Okay, so we are able to fund 207 seats with the 3 million at $14,500 per seat per year. But that year is only 9 months. All of these caveats, okay, I'm happy to put them all down, but just for everyone to understand is that we are essentially saying we're doing the same Redding program in Wilmington for 499 students in the city of Wilmington. Our 3 million of Redding funds is supporting 207 seats. And the breakdown of the contracts that we're supporting is on that chart. So you can see a Leap of Faith, Blossom Inclusion, Christina Cultural Arts, Kingswood, Maria's program, Precious Little Hand, Seeds of Jesus, St. Michael's, Tender Care Learning Academy, and Hilltop actually has like a blend, the most blended, which is why it's at front.
So it's not negative.
It's not negative 50.
Okay.
For those of you who speak better finance than I do, that is not negative 50. That is a caveat to 50. Should have put star. And so that is an update on our numbers. And again, I think one of the biggest successes that we can point to in putting together this program is we started with a smaller number, right? That's the whole point of a pilot. We thought about what would work better. And we expanded it. And not only did we expand it, we're trying to, as the state, take the burden off programs for blending a lot of different grants and funding streams that they get, so that they're not saying, well, here's what I have to do for Redding. Here's what I have to do for ECAP. Here's what I have to do for preschool development grant. And we're just saying, actually, here's what high quality early childhood care and education looks like. Follow these requirements, and we'll worry about the eligibility requirements.
Now, you're still following the Head Start standards.
Correct. Well, so our ECAP standards, the RAC standards are a variation of the Head Start standards. Correct. There are parts, the reason why I'm saying that, Maria, is the federal Head Start rules have a couple of differences that are very important because they're based on federal funding requirements that we don't ask our programs to follow. It would be way too tough and it would be an unfunded mandate. It's tough, and it's tough anyway. That's exactly right. And actually, one of the things that I wanted to also talk about was the process of listening to our programs that we engaged in this last year around the rate, because it is tough and it does take a lot to be able to fund the type of quality that we expect our children to have. And so what we listened and learned from our programs was, hey, you know, it's actually, we do want to grade purchase of care at the program level. Because we were like, oh no, it might be easier for you if we try to make this one rate in a contract so that you can expect your funds in a contract from us. And they said, actually, we would be getting more money and thinking about a way to do better quality if we were able to accept purchase of care for before and after school and during the summer months. Because as I mentioned, this was a 9-month program. And so we heard them, we said, yeah, actually, you're exactly right. We'll figure out the policy monitoring on our end and make sure that you can also accept the purchase of care. And so we did change that after listening to our Wilmington program through the contract negotiation process. And so, again, I'm grateful for the Really Fair programs in the city of Wilmington because they are thoughtful, because this funding stream allowed them to think about how to do things differently. And therefore, they were able to suggest a policy change that was positively impactful for all programs statewide. So I'm happy to talk more in the weeds because I know it, but I just wanted to share really this is a really exciting thing that happened because of the, work that the people in this room, and so thank you for the opportunity, and, happy to answer questions.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about the Redding ECAP seats and, maybe I guess how the funding is created? I know our last meeting, the executive director from St. Michael's was here and she was talking about some concerns. And, in my day-to-day position, I work with therapists who are now having trouble seeing their students because they've moved into what I guess they would call it the Redding seats. And so they are day and at 2, which is when generally our therapists are home. And so that kind of created some unintended consequences. And then last week, when I was at the Wilmington Early Education Council, they were also still speaking about some of those safety concerns.
So I'm sorry, let me say that back to you. So, the concern was that the program ended at 2.
So what the therapist was telling me was because of the seats that they were in, there was a certain amount of time that they were allowed to be at that start. And so their seats were ending, I believe it was 2 o'clock, it was like around that time, which is when they were normally coming out to see that. So now it threw a whole issue because they were having to wait till after that time, in the beginning part of the morning, they were in other like academic activities.
I can definitely learn more about what that program is experiencing. So we also heard similar problems about our half-day programs. So what you're describing is a half-day program. And so we did try to make all of our contracts for full-day programs, so that's 7.5 hours, so that we would no longer have that problem. So that is still something that people are getting used to, because again, if that changed in July, this would be the first time that people are implementing that at the start of the school year. So if there's confusion around that, we can absolutely reach out to the program and get that sorted.
And was there another
This is
question?
probably a dumb question,
Yeah.
but so this adds up to 311 seats. What's the difference between 311 and 40?
So the 499 are the number of seats that are our state-funded seats in the city of Wilmington, right? So, it's kind of a logic problem. So we said that we are going to call all of this, all the full-day seats are following the same requirements in the city of Wilmington. We're gonna pay for as many as we can with Redding. And then we're gonna pay for the rest of those with our either preschool development grant or ECAP funds. So everyone, 499 seats are following that in the city of Wilmington. And these are the programs that are actually with purchase orders receiving funds directly through the Redding funds. Does that make sense?
So the remaining, the difference between those two numbers are not receiving rent funds.
They're receiving ECAP funds.
Just ECAP.
They're following
Got
the same requirements, yet different funds. But to the program, they are following the same program.
I'm probably gonna state the obvious, which is, the braiding of funds creates a lot of confusion and listening, not being here, but listening to the past couple of Redding Commission meetings where this was discussed, in particular, the one that Tika just highlighted. You know, I'm sort of identifying that as a real challenge, but appreciate the fact that we're doing it because we are maximizing our dollars and more kids are being reached in full day programming rather than half day, which I think is, you know, fairly obvious that a full day program is much more impactful. So I anticipate that there are going to continue to be some bumps along the way and challenges. I just encourage you and your team, Caitlin, to keep in communication, you know, with the chairs of the Redding Commission as well as others, in particular, people like Maria and others that are running these programs to troubleshoot. Like you just, you know, said you would do with Tika, like the more troubleshooting we can do, the better. And I appreciate everything that you and the team have done. It's been pretty impressive.
Well, we're trying really hard, and I think that you don't know what you don't know. And so the more people that can come to us and help us understand how, you know, what's written in a policies and procedures manual is actually being implemented, the more helpful that is. And so I just appreciate everyone always being willing to think of us as partners and not someone that's gonna say, no, don't do that, but help us, we'll help figure it out.
I am aware I'm not working anymore, but well aware of the challenges that came forward over the summer about funding. And there was a lot of different of opinion, and I know I happen to be aware that you worked hard with others to work it out to the extent practical, and I certainly appreciate the final decisions that were made and all your work and effort, during all those conversations. So, thank you very much.
For that, for trying your best. I have a great team and a great program.
Any other questions? I'm just seeing a text reminding us to shout for the benefit of people online.
Yeah.
So just use your most aggressive, we heard you, Maria. No, oh, you can't hear it. Okay. Got it.
Should've been online.
Never mind, sorry. It's actually staff in the back.
My sickness.
Yes, Maria.
So Kate, are you gonna put out a list of the programs that are funded across the state? It would be interesting to see, you know, who's working in the same kind of, with the same kind of curriculum, you know?
No, that's a good point. So we actually, so I'll talk a little bit about some more behind the scenes to answer that in a roundabout way. Because I love doing that. So we work with, a technical assistance team who, is basically doing communities of practice with programs that look similar. So one of the other cool things that are happening this year is we're including family childcare programs for the first time in our state funded programs. Like I said, that geographic diversity is a lot different this year than it has been in past because we've expanded from 20 programs to 29 programs with 45 different sites. And so what that allows us to do is kind of have them share information with each other, figure things out. We have a ton of school districts, we have a ton of free Head Start programs. And so there are a lot of different programs that could fit together in different ways. One of the things we struggle with is like organizing people in the best way possible, right? So like organizing by curriculum is a really good idea because we've been typically organizing based on facility type. And so that would be a good way for us to think about this.
I would like to know who's using the curriculum that we use.
And you're using creative. Yeah.
And we test them 3 times a year.
So teaching strategies goals is actually being done by everybody. So we do have the requirement that we use the same format of assessment. It helps us track child outcomes consistently across our programs. And the curriculum that is most associated with that is the creative curriculum. It's a project-based curriculum. It kind of harkens to Reggio Emilia, familiar with that approach, a little bit like Montessori. A lot of people know that, not quite. And so it really helps teachers kind of determine students' interests and have the student interest drive what they're learning, which is really great. And I actually support for all ages, but we're doing it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Caitlin, for coming and, adding so much of that color to that conversation that started at our last meeting. This is a very complicated space, especially when it comes to the resources. So I think we expect that we will be seeing you again and having more questions for you and wanting to get updates. And, my concern is always making sure that we are serving our Wilmington students specifically, equitably and fully. But it is really exciting that the model has been scaled. That's amazing. And we're very glad we got to applaud ourselves for that, and we should continue to do so. So, till next time.
Senator Lofton.
Yeah.
I did get one comment from
Oh.
Senator Buxton.
Yes.
He says, was it stated that the program had expanded to include Kent and Sussex or just Sussex?
Oh, okay. Final question.
Yes, so we have programs statewide who are getting full day rates for following the requirements that were piloted by the Redding program.
So yes, Kent, yes,
Yeah,
that's it.
and that's
Everywhere. Awesome. Good news. Statewide. All right. So with that, I think we are still on schedule and we're going to hand it over to Superintendent Menzer and Ray Jones Avery online to hybrid introduce the social determinants work group update.
I have an easy introduction.
Okay.
Katie and Christy are here. Katie from Data Service Center and Christy from DOE for the last year and change. We've been partnering with Department of Ed to bring forward an element or a design for a data dashboard for the community. And they're here tonight to give us an update.
Awesome,
I'll turn it
welcome
over to them.
in person.
Yeah.
You gonna start?
Sure. Just wanted to introduce myself, Christy Polizzo. I am the Director of the Technology and Data Office with the Delaware Department of Education. I've been in this role for about 2 years, and over the past year, as Dr. Menzer said, that we have been meeting with the Data Service Center and several members of this work group, and really excited about the future that we have scoped out. And so Katie is here. She's the Executive Director of Data Service Center, and really excited for our partnership with them. Data Service Center does amazing work for all of our districts throughout the state. And so really excited about this project.
Okay, so this project, if we look at it as a whole, has 3 major phases to it. And you can go to the next slide. The first phase is defining the requirements. We've completed that. The second phase is gathering the data. We're in progress with that. And then the third phase is actually developing the dashboard. So for the next slide, give a quick update on what we've already done. So last year, we spent about 2 months meeting weekly with a focus group that helped us define what they wanted the dashboard to be. It was a really, really great group of people that gave really good information to us about what they wanted the dashboard to look like. Because they have really good ideas and really broad thinking about it, we kind of had to pare it down and say, the first iteration is going to be based off of data that we currently have, and it's not going to change any data collection that currently happens or changes any processes for schools. So we want to be able to get our hands on the data so that we can bring at least the first iteration forward. So we completed a prototype, and there is a link in the slide to that prototype if anybody was interested in looking at that. And a very, very, very detailed document that defines every aspect of the site. The goal of that, of both the prototype and the design document, is to help inform the development for whoever and whenever that happens. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. All right, so the next phase is gathering the data. So this is actually the hardest part of the entire project. So what we have to do is get data from the entire state, because the dashboard includes reporting around state, county, city, district. So it's a very detailed dashboard. So gathering that data from all of the different districts, seeing where the gaps are, seeing if we're have any changes that we need to make to our ideas about the first iteration, it will drive what the end result dashboard will look like. So we currently have an MOU with the Department of Ed to do that work. The biggest, you can skip to the next one. Thank you. So the biggest piece of this work was to align the city of Wilmington with geocode. So there was nothing in any student data systems that told us who are the city of Wilmington kids. So John Lasnik at the University of Delaware added the city of Wilmington tag based off of the defined boundaries of the city of Wilmington into geocode. We have accessed that data. We're 99% done with that work to actually get it into our systems and say this, and align the addresses with the students to say this student is a city of Wilmington student. So that's huge. That's a huge win for this project. And so then we need to start to take that city of Wilmington tag and bring all the other data together for those kids. So this is a quick outline of all of that data. So it's enrollment, basic demographic information, discipline data, assessment scores, course information, attendance, and any related arts information. And then we also bring together educator data. So when we bring this data together and we create the database for it, then we can start to create some visualizations for that. This stage of it, those visualizations are gonna be either in Excel or Tableau is really our goal. We want to provide it in Tableau, which is it's a very popular, robust tool for creating visualizations around data. And we can probably get really close to what the prototype looks like with real student data. So that's the next part of it. We're going to be really digging into this work once we get past unit count and into October, and then it'll take 4 to 6 months to complete that work. So, questions? Yes.
Oh, wow.
I have a question.
Yep.
I see demographics, behavior, proficiency, other academic, one of the things that I was in a previous meeting with Matt. And we were talking about how difficult it is for students of color to get identified as gifted and talented. I was just wondering if that was the case and then we would need to collect.
It depends on how it's tagged. Yeah, every district probably does things differently to identify some. It may be in courses, it could be in programs, it could be a separate tag. So that's what this work will tell us is, can we get our hands on that data and how can we get it and where does it live within the student system?
You have to be intentional. You want that data. Because
Well, I would just say it's difficult to get because not everyone is assessing for gifted and talented.
Right.
That data set is there, and if we are assessing for it, are you using common assessments across the city to be able to identify? I could say the easier way to do it would be phase 2. We're really looking at potential based on current achievement data to really look at who's not being identified or who's not getting those opportunities. At a level 1, that they move to a more consistent process where are we actually screening for gifted and talented?
I can also add some. My doctorate is in African American state.
Well.
Delaware does not have any requirements. One of the few states in the entire union that does not have requirements for gifted and talented, nor any funding. The federal government is also not requiring, it only has suggestions. So I think there's also some larger policy conversations around gifted and talented and how you assess it. I would hate to use state assessment.
Right.
Because it also has an adverse effect on Latino and African American students being enrolled in gifted and talented. But then there's also piece around the program because we don't have that across the state. So I think people have been really great kind of worms. And I just finished a very long paper on that. So.
I can't learn because I have a lot of educated minds out here and know exactly what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Dr. Bass. Just want to make sure everyone remembers to call you by your new title.
Well, I'm on talking with steps to be done. But I can answer that one.
Other questions for Katie?
I'll certainly make a note for that.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
future.
That's a really good one. There's one in the chat, apparently.
Data linked to students.
Say that again?
Is the educator data linked to students?
So the first iteration of the dashboard will primarily focus on looking at ratios around demographics. There's a formula for doing I think it's called a parity index, I think. It's like off the top of my head, and it's been 9 months since we've talked about it a lot. So it's really just kind of looking at breakdowns of what do the teachers demographics look like, what do the students demographics look like, and should there be adjustments there, you know, informing hiring and that sort of things. Good question. I know you didn't ask it, you presented the question.
And so, oh, yes.
I'll just put this out to the group and certainly not this iteration, but if we could somehow tag cohorts. So if the student starts in kindergarten and they continue to move through, or are they transient, that has a major impact on student success. So we could do a disservice by looking at 3rd grade proficiency and look at that grade level and think, oh, these kids are underperforming, when in fact they may be, but they may have not started in kindergarten with that same cohort. And there's been a number of different people in the state who've run reports like that. So that would have implications on how well we onboard a new student and acclimate them to a school versus like changing curriculum. we tend to go for curriculum because it's in our control. Trying to understand how to acclimate a student, give them supports, because just think about this school year, we're finishing the count. Students in a like third grade class now, fourth grade class, they may be starting to just now get identified for MTSS. If that parent moves, that doesn't necessarily follow the child. So they could then go to another school, then they're backlogged another month or two before they get identified again to go into MTSS. So they just lost half the school year. And that, I would argue, is sometimes more of our issue with students moving throughout. I don't know how that looks in this, that's your world, Kate. But that data could be powerful.
Yeah, I think that as we do this work, we're gonna very much try to, you know, deliver on the first iteration data modeling, but we'll be looking at all of the data to see if there's things that pop out that will help us to even bring recommendations for the future iterations of the dashboard, so.
Yeah, Maria,
I have another question.
great.
Since we are the Redding Consortium, and we just talked about a whole lot of money, are we going to identify the kids that attended the Redding Consortium childcare centers? And how well they're how well they're doing in second and third grade? Are they reading by second and third grade? If they're not, then we need to go back and course correct.
I mean, we've definitely had some internal conversations about tracking outcomes for students who are benefiting from the ECAP, the Reading model ECAP seats, but I would love to hear from the experts around the table on that.
I had the question just around sustainability with that, but I figured this, based on Caden's presentation, it probably wasn't the best place to ask, but it goes to Joe's question too around mobility. Because we're dealing with so many fragmented systems, right? And even looking at our current early learning, early child MOU, where the majority of the early learning centers geographically rest in Red Clay, but they could be a Christina student, but they may stay with us, or then they may move. So you can have a child that within the early learning center enters kindergarten for 1 year, moves and goes to another school for another year, comes back. So I think mobility data would be important to really track the rates at which students aren't continuously enrolled within a given district or within a program that has a partnership with a district. Because I think that alignment is where the challenges present itself. And most often, if you do have a student who is having some kind of adverse experience within our schools, if you look at history, multiple times they've been in all 3 or 4 districts that serve the city of Wilmington. So I think mobility and capturing that is really important.
Every year at budget season, I sit down, there's a meeting with the governor and he brings this up and how do we know these programs are working? So finding a way somehow to track exactly what you're saying, who's going to which program, not just that they went through the Reading program, but which one they went to, so
And I would
that
really
there's
like to
actual
know.
data.
I would really like
So
to
that
know.
there's data 4 or 5 years from now that actually says this had an impact on their reading at
Yeah.
grade 3.
So we have evidence to drive us forward. Matt?
Yeah, one imperfect tool that we have now is the kindergarten assessment. And I know that, Riverside has, it's probably easier for centers that have smaller numbers of kids, but I know that Riverside has tracked the individual kids who have gone through the Reading funded slots there and have had great, I think 100% success on the kindergarten assessment. So that's kind of, cumbersome. The bigger the center is, the more cumbersome it is, and it's only 1 year out. So you're not getting second and third grade numbers, but it is at least one pretty objective metric we can look at.
Well, I can do that at the center. What I want to know, are they reading
By third
by
grade.
second grade or third
Yeah.
grade? And in my kids' case, are they reading in Spanish and English? Because we do Spanish immersion.
Yeah.
I think my question might be for Maria.
Yeah, okay. This is an open.
Say this back.
For kids that are, so I know the preschool kids that are in K-12 end up in Delsey, so they get tagged with student ID starting at age 3 or 2, depending on. My question is, do the ones in private centers that are still getting state and federal funding get student ID numbers so that would follow them?
So yes, actually.
Oh, yes?
Yeah, so, Can I get the weeds for like 1 minute again?
Go.
Okay,
Go to the
so I think this will answer a couple of things. So part of the contract, I mentioned that the data piece, we asked for the same assessment to be used. We also asked for them to put their enrollment into eSchool. So currently the system that we use to track student attendance is in the Department of Education is eSchool. And so they basically create a different row. So I don't know if you know eSchool, but there's a child, and Christy can fact check me on this, is what I understand. So you have a child and then you kind of tag them to the funding source or the program that they might be in. This is done a lot for 619 programs for children in preschool. And so there's also the option of tagging them to ECAP or Redding. So
We can tag them.
we can and actually have a study currently being done with one in the University of Delaware teams. There's so many, I'm sorry guys, I don't remember which acronym, around trying to do that because not our Redding children, but we do have enough data from ECAP to be able to point to some cohorts of third grade grading scores. I think we have like 2 years.
Head Start also, that just.
Head Start, yes. But there's only 1,000, there are about 1,300 children in Head Start. So the other thing to know is that these are small N sizes, right? In terms of state children we're serving statewide, we're talking about like 1,000 kids for each program.
So you said that analysis is underway, Caitlin?
It's currently underway.
Okay, it's not completed yet. What's the completion target?
I mean, you think those would take longer than they should. So around June or by next fall. We'll have at least initial data, right? So I'm happy to show initial reports. It's not longitudinal, it's not gonna be solid, but it's something to go off of.
Some early indicators of the connection between ECAP, Head Start models and third grade reading.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Sorry, someone was speaking. Was it Tika? Go, Tika.
Do the private childcare centers sponsor complete ecosystem? Only if they are, another center teacher is going into a childcare program, they will complete the cost for the child, separately. And a lot of teachers actually use teaching strategy data to use the cost. That's our special education, child outcome summary.
What is the?
The cost of COS is the child outcome summary for children, for receiving, Part B services.
Any other questions for Katie? Okay.
I just want to make sure that I understand. Because he said, do we have it? I didn't know. So I'm just making sure that I understand that you said that we do have student ID now.
Well, so Maria, for every child that is funded by ECAP or Redding or program, we're asking that parent or someone puts into eSchool that child is a part of the LAPC. Now, if she's not doing that for your whole program, unless they're funded by ECAP or Redding.
But that doesn't indicate that they have a student number.
We do. So when you're at, I'm so sorry, I did not say that. You're right. So to be explicit, when you are entered into our eSchool attendance system, what are we generating a number for them? The word is generating a student ID. That's called the DELSIP number. That is tied to the student's identity.
And that's how we track mobility now for K-12.
Sorry, I just did it.
Councilman Street.
Who has access to it after all this is done, and who doesn't have access to it?
The dashboard itself?
Yes.
The dashboard will be a public website. That's the point.
Now, in terms of following the numbers, the student numbers that you're talking about, who has access to it? And who doesn't have access to it? Let me make the point. For years, I didn't fool the University of Delaware because they had a certain professor who did a certain study that said that Black children were inferior. And it's critical that whatever data you gather be safeguarded for potential missteps like that. That's why I asked the question. It can't be answered now. It's something you need to think about in a serious way going forward.
I feel I need to make this comment. So the dashboard will not identify individual students in any way. It'll all be summary data. And if one of the rules in the dashboard is if the end count or the number of kids in a specific area is less than 15, then we say it's less than 15, we don't actually say it's one student, because then you could identify who that student is. So protecting student information is really important as part of the project. I don't know if that's addressing your concern, but I felt like I needed to say that.
And the data is gonna be synthesized in such a way to like help, tell a story about certain
Exactly.
trends
Yes,
that we're interested in seeing. And the raw data behind that is not going to be accessible.
exactly.
Is that helpful at all? Yeah, we'll see.
Depends on,
We'll see.
it depends on who you share it with
Yeah.
and how it's shared.
We do have a disclaimer street on the, when we did to do the design, we were thinking about that very same thing in
Oh,
some
right.
small work groups in terms of a disclaimer around what the data should be used to tell, or, and now that this data is not an analysis.
Right.
First off, so there was some recognition around that. But there was a strong feeling that this dashboard would be accessible to the public, parents, understandable, digestible, they would be able to manipulate it and utilize it. Unlike some of the other dashboards, data pools that are out there that are like, 100,000 lines, pivot, you gotta know how to do pivot tables to get it to tell you anything. This was designed to tell the story of what it looks like from a larger perspective, like Senator Lockwood was saying. So your point is well made, and it was something that was at the table when we were talking about when you enter into the portal, what does it tell you? Agreed.
Right, and I know we've had some meetings for that, was the exact discussion.
Mhm.
We are looking to provide, this synthesized information to help us help student groups that may be struggling, not to paint them poorly.
Right.
And say that's the story. But how do you make sure that you're doing that? Because we've certainly seen these things misused in other contexts.
Right, and I think that's why this phase 2 is really important, because we'll take the real data, create the visualization so that we can all look at it and go, is this actually telling the story, and are we being careful about how we're sharing that,
Yeah.
presenting that story?
Yeah. Thank you for being thoughtful about that. Any other questions on this particular item? Okay, thank you so much to both of you. Obviously, I think there's a lot of data enthusiasts in this room that appreciate your work, so you've got a cool job. I think we are ready to move to the educator work group update with Noelle Picara online. Possibly with a baby, and that'd be cool. Just have a little one. Noelle, are you with us?
I'm here. Yeah, I might have to grab the baby. She's crying a lot. My husband's walking out the door, so
Okay.
I'll do my best. I was just asking Haley if somebody else might be able to read Mike's part, because I think I can do my part,
Yeah.
but I don't think I can do all of Mike's
Yeah.
part. And
Shelley has got your back.
I have this note,
thanks.
so, I got you, and you focus on the little one.
That's right, baby first.
Noelle, let me know if, you need me to just jump in with any of your parts at any point too, okay? Because I have your notes as well.
Thanks, Shelley.
All right, good evening, everyone. Shelley Rouser, and I'm with Delaware State University. I also was a part of the educator work group, which was one of our committees that we hear somewhat a little bit less of in terms of active committee, but the work is very active. And so I'm going to speak for Representative Mike Smith, who asked me to share his information, his update. So as you all know, the educator work group was focused on recruitment, retention, and the equitable allocation of qualified educators in our schools. And that work group really, if you boil it all down, came to two levers. The one lever is around professional development, whole school professional development. And the other lever is around scholarships that will help the retention of educators in our Wilmington schools. So updates, general updates, 136 scholarships have been awarded since fall of 2022. That includes 71 scholarships that have been awarded just in the summer and fall. There is a total allocation this year of just under 400,000, 385K to be exact. And we do also want to let you know that the Pulaski Early Education Center is now added to the list of eligible schools to receive the Redding Scholarship. Application deadlines, are spread out throughout winter and also going into spring. And we will announce those spring, times and winter times soon. The fall work is well underway. And the financial supports, Delaware Educators webpage, was recently launched by the Department of Education. And that makes a nice one-stop shop for our educators to go and learn more about this incredible opportunity. There's some updates that the Delaware Higher Education Office wanted to pass along about the application review and awarding process. There were some questions that have come up about this before, mainly for the purpose of getting to how do we make sure our educators aren't out of pocket with the money that's required for them to go to school. So this update will hopefully help alleviate the questions that came up in our last quarterly. So what ends up happening is that once the semester application period closes, applications are reviewed, duplicate entries are removed, and then verifications begin to take place. There's an employment verification and degree verification enrollment process. And that's what allows then for us to identify who meets the eligibility requirements. And then generally the institutions of higher education will wait until the drop add period to do that verification. But once that period happens, then the universities signal that this student is indeed enrolled. And once they are enrolled, then those monies are dispersed to the IHE. So that definitely does not put our educators in a position where in order to continue their education. So that's a big win too. Caitlin talked about hers, and this is another huge one. And the Department of Education has been extremely responsive to our needs, as well as making sure that this is a seamless process. So that's that. We have run into challenges and we will continue to solve them just as we ran into some before, and we are solving them. One of them that we're running into is that people are applying but not enrolling in the course. I won't get into the weeds of that. But if you have questions, I can attempt to. Some people are applying after the deadline has expired, after the application period has expired, and that's causing some challenge. The Delaware Office of Higher Education is accepting late applications, but this can cause some other delays. So if you hear of educators experiencing some of that, we do have to have some deadlines. Those deadlines that they may or may not meet may affect them. So that's a kink that we're working through. And another important update here is that the Higher Education Office will continue message to applicants that they must enroll before applying. So they must enroll into the program before applying, and that the before applying, let's see, must enroll in a course, before applying, and that the applications must be submitted during the semester application timeframe. So those are some general updates, and we will continue to surface anything, busting down the barriers that will help us make sure that we get these resources to where they need the most. Noelle, are you there to be able to jump in at this point?
Got a crying baby.
There, she turned her screen off, so I'm not sure.
I think we should just go.
Okay, I'm not sure. I'll give a 2 more seconds wait time. She might be the low one. So, the work that Mike and Noelle has done is incredible. They led a very efficient process with that educator work group. Those recommendations came out very thorough, to the point, very easy to turn into action, and that's exactly what we've done. The consortium originally tasked the educator work group with reviewing local data. That group did it. Looking at best practice research, the group did it. And creating recommendations for recruitment and retention and equitable allocation, as I mentioned earlier. We came up with those 2 levers around scholarships and around whole school professional development. We'll speak to what's going on the whole school professional development part in just a little bit. So it was December 2020, actually, when the recommendations were submitted. And in 2022, the recommendations were funded. And so now we're seeing those recommendations come to fruition now in fiscal year 23, we began to see that come to fruition. So the educator work group stopped meeting as a whole, but the work is continuing. And the work is continuing. Representative Mike Smith, along with Noel, have worked with multiple entities to make sure that the work continues, that this doesn't end up being a piece of paper and recommendations that everyone's having like a hot potato, who's going to do something with it. We have been seeing those recommendations along. They've worked diligently as co-chairs. They've worked with Redding Consortium staff, Department of Education, and other leadership to make sure that these initiatives are implemented. And those two levers are well underway. I'll speak to the whole school professional development shortly. I'll keep going because I'm not sure that Noelle is back.
I'm back.
Okay, great. Noelle?
Hi. Yeah, where did you leave off, Shelley?
I just got through, I read off your first section and, I read off your first section and Mike's points, and so your second section is where.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, we are really proud of the work that we did on the Reading educator work group, and Shelley was there from the beginning with the work group. Jasper's gonna have a lot to say as well. And I'm sorry for my ins and outs, it's just like crazy night. So we really believe that the impact the Reading Scholarship has made for educators and school staff is a powerful example and an important reminder of the remarkable work that the Redding Consortium has done and is continuing to do. I was telling Tizzy my concern about this group when I joined is that a lot of things in Wilmington, they talk about a lot of ideas and then nothing really happens. And so I'm really glad, you know, when we had people talk who had received the scholarship, you know, I felt really proud of that we've done so much and that we have collaborated across different groups instead of being in silos and just brainstorming. So we both want to announce that the educator work group is not going to formally reconvene as a work group. And due to my capacity, which is very obvious, I'm not going to be serving as co-chair anymore. So I have served as co-chair for almost 4 years now, and I feel like we have set out to complete these tasks. And right now they're just in the implementation phase. So we are excited to announce that Tika Hartsock, who's another Reading Consortium member, who has also helped us a lot, worked with us. She's going to be joining the team and she'll coordinate and implement the educator initiatives. So the internal team will continue to implement and follow through on our initiatives, but we're really just an implementation phase. I'll still be on the consortium as a voting member. It just, since the educator work is kind of wrapping up and I have this crazy baby, you know, I'll be kind of passing it over to Tika.
Well, they'll just take a moment just to congratulate and thank you for all the work that you did at the helm of the work group. We'll just applaud you if we give you this spot. Still working in those schools along with having adorable Jasper. And then also thank you and congratulations to Tika for stepping up to help make sure that we do that follow through that we're so proud of. Awesome. We have a question to the secretary.
So how are you tracking outcomes? Are you tracking retention? Are you tracking, obviously there's the input of putting them through the program and presumably them graduating or completing the program, but how do you track how it, I mean, ultimately, the biggest thing is not just getting people through these programs, but retaining.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, because if they jump to a district that isn't in the same need, the state still benefits, but not in the equity.
Yeah.
Trying.
So I'll talk about some conversations that are hot and heavy right now, just with the Wilmington Learning Collaborative, and then we can talk about how, you know, this could be, you know, incorporated for the Reading schools as a whole. You know, we're talking about what are the key metrics we'll be following with our with the WLC schools, and so certainly the retention, I guess, on a, you know, quantitative level, we just that, as you know, we go through students who or teachers who just started this last year, following their retention for starters. I guess for beginning, we could look at how many teachers who took advantage of the course of last fall or last spring are still with us. But certainly we can see these educators through to the program completion. And then we can also have the qualitative side of things too, I think is equally important.
I realize.
With
it's not just
it just
one year,
started,
tracking
but
it
it's
over
a, you know,
5 or 10 or 15 years.
but identifying the metrics, nevertheless, now is the time to do it. So, I'm also curious about the conversations that we have with educators. So, we don't have that system in place, and thank you for the push to do that. I think that could be the next challenge that we take on. We really were just trying to get this thing off and running to start with, but it's a good push, and I think we need to follow it for, you know, WLC as well as, you know, the Redding schools as a whole. But not forgetting the qualitative side too, where we have those, you know, stories of teachers leaving, not feeling their voices heard, et cetera. I think is equally important that we make space for that qualitative piece. Yes,
I was
Dr.
gonna ask the
Bass.
qualitative data where it has become peer pressure, at least at Eastside, for staff to be a part of the Reading funding. And that is some staff members who want to have the funding, some are working mothers and fathers. And when you have multiple children and you're not where you want to be as a paraprofessional, it is very challenging. So the push is if you're making less than $40,000 a year and you're making real life decisions, the funding is being as easy as possible.
Right.
The second piece is also knowing that I'm seeing more staff of color take advantage of this funding. And so I think it has now gotten to a point that I'm no longer having to shout and yell and say, take advantage of this, because the concern was it was gonna go away.
Yes.
So why should I enroll for one semester of college when it will not be there? And now that's been there for multiple years. Oh, I need to take advantage of this, and there are people doing well. So thank you to Redding Consortium, because people are actually taking advantage of this.
Well, we made a real
To your
point.
point, the key for it not going away and for it growing is to then have the data that shows it's actually working
Absolutely.
for retention.
Right.
And to maintain, you know,
Yep.
good educators staying in the schools that need them the most.
Have those answers. Absolutely. Like that seems to be the running theme for the night.
Yeah.
And it was important to us that we make this a ongoing part of our budget. What we did last year was kind of like, what's a quick fix? What's something that we can do to provide some immediate support? Having that experience, getting the feedback that we did, it's now an ongoing budget item for the work of, you know, the educator initiatives. Oh, I was just gonna add to what Dr. Bass was saying. The WLC is bringing on board a director of educator pathways, and this is going to be the person really building caseloads of the adults we have in our buildings, leading learning for our children who haven't had those opportunities, right? Who are parents, who are substitute teachers, but who have been doing this for years. I've been in schools, I've spoken with a number of adults who said, look, every year I come in around October, teachers leave, I finish out the year. And, you know, you're doing this year after year, and no one is paying attention to the missed opportunities, particularly for Black and Brown educators. So this is going to be a person who's a core member of our leadership team, building those caseloads and connecting those pathways, because it has to be sustainable. If we have a parent to Paris program, Paris should become teachers on record. Our teachers on record should become our teacher leaders. Our teacher leaders should be fueling our leadership pipeline. So this has to be sustainable. You know, it can't be a one-year opportunity. These have to be multi-year efforts. Yes, thank you, Dr. Marcos, Dr. Green, and then.
One question, does our HR departments know who within our district are receiving scholarships?
Well, it's easy enough to share.
No, I was just gonna,
Yeah,
just so that
I'm not
because
sure
there
if we're
are
closing that
efforts
loop or not.
underway, you know, in terms of, and if they're viable candidates, I know, you know, again, Dr. Bass indicated that become a competitive professional culture within the East Side. We're a large system.
Yeah.
And so making sure as we look at our retention efforts, that this opportunity, and even if the funding isn't there, at least there are mechanisms and processes that we can learn from an HR standpoint to be able to look to replicate or seek other funding to be able to support what's coming out of the credit.
Okay.
Yeah,
Follow up on that.
I'll just note that the Department of Higher Education Office, they send out messages and emails about the scholarships to all the eligible Reading Consortium schools.
Yeah, not the eligibility, But in terms of who's actually.
I think it's more the
It's
data we were
actually
just
in
looking at, Elena.
Mhm.
We'll follow up on that for you. Yeah,
Maria?
thanks.
I
Wait,
just
you had a
wanted to mention that I will share a contract that I have with my staff, just not the teachers, but if we pay for an educational opportunity, they have to be willing to stay around for 2 or 3 years, depends on the amount of money. But they make a commitment, you want this money, then you have to stay around. And that might be a way to keep them in high needs.
I hear you, and it's, it was actually in place some time ago, with scholarships, such as the Kristen McCullough Scholarship. But it's my understanding, correct me, Secretary, but I think the department kind of found it hard to kind of just keep people.
Well, the recourse
Saying
when
those-
they
yeah.
don't follow it is very challenging.
It was a lot.
For, the state of Delaware. to
It was a
understand
capacity
things.
training, I think, to hunt people down, right?
That's right.
Yes.
And
As the agency that ultimately gets the ones that you can't collect, because they come to the Division of Accounting,
that's,
it is a real pain, especially if the amount, I mean, it's one thing if it's $1,000 or $2,000,
Yeah.
where you can take it out of the
Yeah.
next paycheck.
Yeah.
But if you're $25,000-$30,000
Right.
into somebody,
Mhm.
it creates this collection.
So
But I mean,
policies like that, I think, kind of pulled back, I think about a year ago, right?
that is correct.
Could Maria be in charge of that?
I'm fine,
The Secretary of Collections.
Well, I'll tell you this, it got me back. I was able to go to school because of the Kristen McCullough Scholarship, and I actually, I'm here because of it.
That's awesome.
So very,
Yes.
Just not have it all.
yeah.
You have teachers that have graduated and they bought a lot of money. And with the expectation that if I work in a certain kind of school for a certain period of time, I'm gonna get help with my loan. And that could help with retention, number one, but number two, to my limited knowledge, these teachers situated like that don't seem to be getting a whole lot of information on what's really available to them in terms of student loans, at the state level or elsewhere. And I just think that's something that, you wanna look at in your human resources, departments look at in terms of making sure that the teachers who have loans have access to all the information and all the resources possible.
Yes, Superintendent Hiller.
Last year, we brought up the fact that PS DuPont was not on the list.
Mm.
And reviewing, they're still not on the list. That'd be a consideration.
Do you want to speak to that at all?
I don't know that I can.
Okay. I know there was some review, I guess, of eligible programs, not eligible schools, right?
Can
Yeah.
we talk about exactly what the backstory is on why?
I wish I could
Sidebar.
backstory.
I
Yeah.
mean, are they listed as a Reading school?
That's great.
I'm guessing that's why we have,
It's just the
we've
Reading
made the
schools, but-
scholarship available to Reading schools.
Yeah. I think that's worthy of further discussion.
So that's bigger than,
Yeah, it
happy to
is.
huddle afterwards and we can have a follow-up.
Yeah, we'll make sure to note that as an action
It
item.
was conversation.
Say that again?
I said, which was a Lewis conversation.
Uh-huh. Right, what you
Because
mean
of
it
What the threshold was, right? I don't know, the threshold was still
for wraparound services.
the 50% threshold to qualify for these schools. And they were
Right.
at, but yet they're considered for a WLC school, but necessarily wasn't on.
Yeah, there's definitely some kinks, as you said, that we're always willing to revisit, I think, any aspect of the program, so.
I'll find out
Um,
afterwards.
We'll check our notes. Okay, any other questions for Shelley and Noel? Okay, I think we're.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't
Oh,
talk about professional
Oh,
development
okay.
at all, but I don't have an update on
yeah,
that one as much, but you all know what we're doing this year with professional development. And the support of the Wilmington Learning Collaborative's professional development efforts was the move that we made last year, or earlier this year. In the future months, Tika, myself, and Mike will be huddling to figure out what that looks like for the Reading schools as a whole. To have professional development, maybe grant sort of opportunities for schools and for Reading schools to apply for. So
Okay.
that's our next move, and we'll be in touch on more with that. So that's
Awesome.
my
Thank you,
last
Shelley.
update.
Awesome work, thank you. Okay, so we're going to shift to our last work group update. This is an update on the redistricting work group. Unfortunately, Representative Chakotcha is in Sussex County tonight. So I'm going to play support to Councilman Street to provide a very brief update. And I'll pass it to Jay in a second. Just wanted to start with a baseline reminder that that just the very action item of developing a redistricting proposal is a mandate in the legislation that established this body. And I would say early 2020, if you guys recall, we had a actually fairly active group that was getting, nearing the possibility of doing that when the pandemic hit and we shifted. And so, we have reconstituted the group. I think if you recall in recent meetings, or reconstituted it as a key agenda item with Councilman Street and Representative Chakotcha as work group leads. And also in the time that has passed, a lot has changed in the education landscape. There's been closures and purpose changes. We now have the WLC on the landscape. But we wanted to make sure to have a clear conversation about this governance work in a context that is going to acknowledge what has come up to this point and considers that we've got a new landscape that we're working with. So I'll let Jay introduce himself and add anything he would like at this point before we go to that slide.
Well, I can only add history. And that history being in 2001, 2008, 2015. Committees authorized by the General Assembly made recommendations about Wilmington schools. Number one, a weighted funded formula for high poverty schools. And number two, a reduction in the number of districts in the city. And when that proposal failed in the General Assembly on the WEAC plan, I told the members of the General Assembly then that I don't care if you pass it or not, I'm not gonna beg, I'm just gonna sue you. So we sued, we settled, we got part of the weighted funding formula, and we still have the district problem. And it was recommended then, and we're gonna recommend something from the options at some point in time. But it's in the planning stages. But for all this continued argument over the past 22 years that we can't go from 4 to 2, or some districts can't lose part of this, part of that. If we were in the process in the 70s, when we went from 11 to 1 overnight, I don't want to hear it. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So this work group's initiative is operating a little bit differently, as I mentioned. Councilman Street and Representative Chakotcha are leading the work. Matt and I are supporting, and it's really been done in close contact with our IPA and DSU staff. And what has occurred so far is really just vetting previous plans around governance change. You'll see, some of us were part of these conversations and projects, and just really doing analysis on similarities and differences across these plans, the level of vetting that occurred in these different plans. And so that's been the work that the chairs have been doing up to this point. And I think there's an expectation that in the not too distant future, although we don't have a timeline to present at this time, that there will be obviously a turn to stakeholder engagement when there is a proposal with which to engage stakeholders. But right now it's really plan to plan phase, as Councilman Street said. Did you want to add anything to that?
Question.
Yes.
So it's not a committee.
No, and it's not a broad-based committee. There's been a lot of task forces and committees and groups that have done extensive work on the topic. And so I think essentially you'll see an engagement that is comparable to a committee work, but I think, we've gone to the table a number of times with a large group of folks to sit and have, conversations that didn't move forward.
How does that fit in with the idea of collaboration, multiple stakeholders? And we've got that representation on all of the committees, but this one is gonna be different.
I think just operationally different. I think you can expect collaboration and all stakeholders being consulted, but there's no way that a plan is gonna move forward without that occurring. I think it's just the difference between having like a static standing committee approach that we've seen in the past versus something that is more nimble and able to pursue that in a different way.
Led by just the chairs.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So if I can ask a
Yes.
question. In the earlier committee, I know there was a fair amount of involvement. Because ultimately math has to work from a funding perspective. Are you guys bringing them into at some point?
Can you speak up, please? Everyone speak up. We're having a hard time hearing the back.
So I was saying in the earlier group, there was a fair amount of involvement of the counties, my department, the OMB, just to sort of look at the math of it all. Because you gotta, and obviously some of that's changing. A lot of it is gonna change for the reassessment.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have all new numbers, but whatever gets recommended has to work economically.
Yeah.
So I'm just, is that gonna be part of the
Yeah,
process?
I mean, I don't see how there could possibly be a plan that was drafted that didn't involve that aspect. I think if you look at like the WEIC plan, for example, that almost made it to passage 5 years ago. I think the scope of that work and the stakeholders and the consultation that's involved there is the standard.
I mean, theoretically, it should be easier with reassessment and with the weighted funding. But, you know, somebody's ultimately gonna say what happens to the bonds of that school. And
Oh, yeah.
See, that all has.
Yeah.
Part.
Yeah, I don't think the expectation should be just a couple paragraphs saying do this, do that, but there would be a planning process involved here.
Senator Doc, is it fair to say, again, I'm trying to figure this out, that plan, that we won't be part of the plan development, but the plan will be enacted on our behalf?
No, that's not accurate.
I'm not hearing what you're saying, and I know you're not hearing it.
Well,
Can you say that a little louder?
what he's saying is that to the extent that if Brandywine has to take in part of the city that it doesn't already have and used to have, they're not gonna support it. I'm not gonna play this game with him. That's what this is about. And in terms of process, we had the Women's and Neighborhood School Committee in 2001. We had the Women's and Education Task Force in 2008. We had WIG in 2015. All of them said the same thing. So to bring a whole bunch of new people to the table now is a continuation of 20 years, and something is going to change, whether some folks like it or not.
And I'm gonna push back and say that the last time this committee existed, there were members that represented the stakeholders on that committee. Multiple models of redistricting were presented, one of which very closely aligns with the WLC. But that is gonna be abandoned, or, again,
Nobody has said that.
here's,
Yeah, I think it's premature.
well,
Nobody has said that. It has to include the WLC.
what's that?
It has to include the WLC. How you going to work with the cities, the schools in the cities and not include the WLC as part and parcel to?
I agree. I struggle with a committee that doesn't have representation other than just the chairs.
And the entire consortium, it has to be a part of advancing any proposal. And so the idea that we're going to advance something that doesn't consult with the members of the consortium is just not reality.
Can I ask a question as a former member? When we get to that, sorry, this is Kika, Zoom folks. When we get to that point, do we just get to see the final plan, or are we going to be able to see iterations and have collaborative conversations?
I mean, you know, we're trying to be transparent now and saying that this is work that is beginning and we're planning to plan. So if that's something that the consortium would like, I think this is the forum for us to collect that feedback.
As someone that formally sat on that work group, I would like to still have some involvement as we go forward. Versus just coming at the end and saying, here's what we've decided.
Yeah.
Let's say,
Well, I would respectfully suggest that the harsh reality is politics is gonna play a critical role in that. And if this consortium doesn't support it, it's dead on arrival for it. We understand that. That there may be differences of opinion, it may be a majority, decision, but none of us are naive enough to think that we should go forward with this as a Redding Consortium recommendation without the input of the consortium.
Any other questions?
My only
Yes.
question, just for the sake of this meeting tonight. Legislation for redistricting 23-24.
What, is that a question about timeline?
Yes.
Um,
Because you're saying, the way I read that is saying, we're gonna have legislation. We're in 23-24 now, so it's the timeline.
you mean like, could something come forward next year?
Can I speak as an individual?
Yeah.
We're gonna have a new governor. 25. I really don't feel like going through this and starting over with rookie. And, the governor has been well informed. Members of the General Assembly have been in this, the long term, those who've been serving for long periods of time, they're well aware of it. Legislation that passed this year ain't gonna happen, not anytime soon. And either they're gonna do it or we're not gonna do it. So my answer, my personal answer to your question is, yeah, I wanna have legislation in as early in the General Assembly as possible. So they can fight like hell and do whatever they're gonna do. Because you're not gonna get a consensus on this. You're gonna get pushback. That's what happens when you make change. By the same token, the whole conversation, not the whole conversation, but part of the conversation that we had tonight was looking at the data, mobility patterns in the city. So if I live on the west side of 95, I'm in Red Clay. If I move to the east side of 95, I'm in Christina. The mobility patterns of children in the city have not changed over the last 20 years. If you're in housing authority, you go wherever you're placed when their change is made. So we have kids that go back and forth all the time. When I was Hilltop, I had kids in all 4 districts, all 5 districts. And that's not going to change. But what changes is what takes place in those schools from one side of the freeway to the other. And that's a problem. Y'all are educators, not me. I'm just an advocate. But continuity, at least I know as an advocate, continuity of program, continuity of curriculum, continuity of personnel is critical. And we purposely and intentionally change it when those kids move. That's just my 2 cents.
So,
And then we end up with 0 to 9% proficiency rate and wonder why the kids are running up down the street shooting at each other at 12 and 14 years old. And at the end of the day, whether it's 4, 2, or 1, what matters most is the outcome. And all this money that we got on the table for Red and some of it that we got through the litigation, what good does it do if we don't change things? And y'all educators, not me. But everybody has to have a plan with single digit proficiency. They're not proficient. What are you doing to make them proficient before they graduate? And from 2001 from the neighborhood school committee. Extended school days, extended school years. Those classes need to be cut down. Some of those kids need one-on-one. Some of them need to be looked at for IEPs and all that, which costs money. But if we don't do those things, they're not going to gain proficiency. And what I just talked about will continue. And as I said at county council meeting last night, either we educate them now and spend that money, or just spend the money on a new jail that the state doesn't know how to operate.
So, thank you. I'll reiterate, this is part of our mandate and why this body exists. We have an obligation to do this work. It's important work. I want to point also to, as I said, we have a plan to plan. We may have, hopes around timeline, but we're not here presenting a timeline to you tonight, for a reason. And we do want to acknowledge, to your point about single digit proficiency, there, has been some introspection amongst, the chairs of the consortium, the chairs of the work group, and members of IPA and DSU. Shelley, I would point to particularly that we think it's important to acknowledge that this work we feel is very important. We don't see it as a solution to education issues in a direct fashion, to those student outcomes that we're talking about, but as a necessary first step to streamline governance, reduce fragmentation, and support doing all of these other things that we are talking about in this group and in our various work groups pretty much nonstop. And so we will continue to study and come back to you as there are updates to share.
I just want to make sure everybody understands, it's just not Wilmington kids. Yeah. It's not just Wilmington kids. I got a grandson who has everything that he could possibly. He's below proficiency. And I have not seen the school come up with a plan to get this kid proficiency. Someone that can build a whole village in that, whatever game it is.
Minecraft.
Village, you can compete with an engineer. But he can get no proficiency. It's crazy, and there's no room for this kid who's 12 years old, smart, but school's not that important. I would have put a chunk on his head, but that's not my lane, right? I wanted to grandma. But it's not just Wilmington kids, honey.
I agree, but we're here tonight and on the
I know.
consortium for Wilmington Kids. But trust me, and it thrills me to talk about some of the other initiatives that we've undergone that have been pilots that have been able to scale up. And I do believe that if we really solve some of these issues for Wilmington kids, we have great evidence and examples to work from that will serve all Delaware students. And that ultimately is what equity is going to be about. But we're here tonight for Wilmington Kids.
That's why the school funding litigation went statewide.
Yeah.
We had to recognize that as we were preparing. It's not this one, it's the whole state.
Yeah.
I'll become governor, how you like that?
So,
I'm ready to do that.
okay.
It's already.
Is that an announcement? Well, obviously, this is gonna be easy and fun. And with that, we are gonna close.
I do have one question.
Yes.
Representative Kim Williams, she asked if the meetings will be public. The funding and governance meetings.
Well, I'm sure there will be public facing, that's part of the plan to plan. There aren't any public facing planning meetings. I can imagine that there will be at some point, but there's nothing on the calendar right now at the stage of development that this work group is in. But, I think that's probably going to be.
I think the
absolutely
answer
necessary.
has to be yes.
Okay, there we go. That's your
Don't
chair.
get in trouble if they don't, so.
Yeah, I don't know how we could avoid that.
Because we're gonna get pushback regardless of what we recommend. And so the answer to the representative, in my opinion, co-chair with the representative is yes.
Okay, there's your answer. Okay, thank you, Councilman, for taking on this
I'm
an
working for
easy
you right
project. Okay, so if there is nothing else, we are going to move into public comment. So I don't know if we have anyone in the room here who would like to offer public comment, or if there's anybody online signed up. Just looking around to the staff to see if we've got anybody. Looking pretty good on time, so. Oh, I see one. Oh, nope, that's a personal message. Sorry, don't look. Okay, well, if there are no questions or no comments, I think we can close out for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Both online. Do we need a motion? Do we need a motion? Do we have a motion to adjourn? Is that a motion? Do you have a motion?
We're not.
Oh, sorry, we just adjourned, Kelly, so,
The Vision Coalition, Councilman Street just mentioned about Delaware school funding. AIR is a part of the lawsuit, had to do an analysis, on Delaware school funding. Next week, the Vision Coalition is just hosting an initial meeting with national experts and local folks. It's October the 4th. Elena has, I believe, has the invite, but they just wanted to share that information.
awesome. And
In
before,
preparation for the report to AIR.
that's wonderful. And while everyone's still seated, does anyone else have any announcements or updates you'd like to share?
If you
Okay.
want to attend the Latin ball.
Oh, what
Latin
is
salsa, food,
detail?
October 20th, 6 o'clock at the
Deerfield this year. Oh.
October 5th, Malcolm Jenkins Super Bowl Eagle champion will be at Williams Public Library. That's Thursday.
You love that
There's an
library.
incredible host. Can't wait to have
Is it you?
you here. No,
Is
yeah, me.
Oh,
We both play. Come on out, have a good time.
very cool.
The Eagles.
Yeah. Super Bowl champion.
Wait, who do you support?
I'm just-
Okay. I was like, is she?
You met your moment.
We're good.
All right, cool. Thank you, everyone. If you have any updates that occur to you later, please share them with the team and we'll get them out to all members.